Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon to those of you here in the East Coast of the US. Good evening to the mystery guest here and to those of you else in CET. And good now to whoever you are, wherever you are, and whenever you are in the universe when you happen to see this video today. So we are here. I am Ryan Erickson. This is BetaCodex Live, our weekly adventure into the beauty of the 12 principles and the laws of the BetaCodex and the work the system approach of open space beta, relative targets, and cell structure design. So with me, as always, is Niels Pflaeging. Hello, Niels.
Hello, good evening from my side. Good to be back. This is our edition number 11.
Yeah, edition number 11. We will get the dirty dozen next week, and it'd be sooner. You will be heard back on Monday with a secret topic we'll talk about in our after party, I'm assuming, and that will bring us to today and the principle number 10 of the BetaCodex being this. Mastery-based decision. And so when I read that first, I'm like, okay, this makes sense that thinking about this as we learn in the Agile domain, that you, as wherever possible, defer to the team for their decisions and information about what's happening with their customers, with the market, and the market in that sense, in a traditional organization being just the customer and their view, this kind of small, not the holistic view of the BetaCodex in teams at the periphery of the peach of the organization, sensing into the market and deciding what will happen. So this topic came from another place too with me recently about the idea of empowerment. And the word empowerment implies a few things, and that there is a granting of power from somewhere. And that, where is that power coming from? Is it coming from position? Is it coming from bureaucracy? Or is it coming from mastery? Is it coming from mutual respect and working with one another in a team with potential for conflict, social density, potential diversity of opinion, kind of what we even have in open space, this small open space. So that empowerment, well, why am I dependent as a person in a small group on position to yield myself to the sky and ask for power? Why am I not responsible for my own work and the work I do with my team to authorize myself and to empower myself in pursuit of what we do in the market? So that's why this topic came to me, and of course, I think of these things now in the BetaCodex.
What reminded you of empowerment recently, over the last couple of days?
It was a week ago. Yeah. It was one of those lovely posts by your friend of mine, Adam Grant, who said this: bosses versus leaders. Bosses do something crazy, and leaders lead by empowering. Leaders decide by power. So
interesting. Adam Grant, the best-selling book author, right?
Yes.
So he should know and doesn't, right? Interesting.
Yeah.
We talked of empowerment because I think that's what when you just explained this, Ryan, I was reminded of our age. I mean, we share many passions, right? The passion for jazz music and electric bass, bass players, and so on, and music in general, and so on. But also, what something we share, I think, is that we are both around 50 years old, right?
Yes.
And so we started our careers somewhere in the 90s, right?
Yep.
I was a little late to the game, I think, but my first apprentice traineeship in working really in a real company was in Buenos Aires in 1996. And back then, empowerment was a huge thing. Do you remember the 1990s? Mid 1990s, empowerment was all the rage. It was one of the biggest things. Business process. No, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't in my in that point. I had graduated college in '93. I was working in retail, and it was just a different environment. I didn't get into large
Okay.
organizational work till 1998. So
Okay. Because one of the first things I worked at Xerox in Argentina at the time, which was big in total quality management and process management and re-engineering. The first thing my boss gave me in Buenos Aires in the office was a book about business process re-engineering or re-engineering. Hammer and Champy were the authors, and empowerment was a big topic in that book. And overall, empowerment was all the rage, really. And of course, then later, I think we all kind of realized that empowerment, there was a conceptual flaw to it. Tom Peters is great, has spoken bigly about this thing that, of course,
that's a triggered word.
Am I using that kind of language now? No, I mean, he's eloquently. Tom Peters speaks eloquently of the flawed idea of empowering, which of course assumes that you first disempower the person to then re-empower it. And then there's an additional flaw I think that few people realize there is that empowerment means empowering a person and not a team. The BetaCodex is all about, if we talk about empowerment in that context, we will talk about empowering. Decentralization is about empowering teams, not individuals, right? And of course, the whole idea is really a bit screwed, right? Of empowerment. The same, I think, goes for participative, whatever. And I think the Adam Grants of this world, they are so stuck in command and control thinking that they do not realize that these things, participation, empowerment, are really, it's like bettering the life of slaves. It's really not a good thing at all. It's just command and control with lipstick again, right? So all these gurus and top authors and so-called thought leaders, the next, right, of this world, sorry, they all so stuck in command and control thinking. It's ridiculous.
And that,
right? And then the BetaCodex is talking about, okay, let's shift the power from bosses to people with mastery. That's a very different animal, really. And as a principle, not as a boss's decision, or today I will be participative and I will delegate a little bit. Delegation, by the way, from the 1970s was an earlier wave of that, right?
Well, and this, again, as management thought has evolved in some way, that the idea of I'm trying to think of stewardship delegation. Stephen Covey's from Stephen Covey's work. I am a big fan of Covey's work. That's how I came into personal development.
I did not know that. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's again, where was I in 1998? That's where I was in 1998.
Where?
And in that thought, my educational development, professional development, was sponsored by a great manager that I had. Again, I'm going to use the terms of the time and not go through it, but she was a fantastic manager, and she sponsored my growth and sent me to a 2-day session on 7 habits and what that was. And I bought the book and I listened to it, and so I still have a sense of allegiance to those principles, and less so in terms of the leader has the ideas and the leaders that I shall delegate to you, my flock. That's kind of, which is now, as I think about it, is less humane. But yes, delegation was there. It was stewardship delegation, was this whole idea of Covey saying to his son, I'm not going to tell you how to, green and clean is the principle for our lawn. And I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but just know green and clean. I want all the stuff off the lawn. But he kind of explained the principle and then said, you deal with the how. And then the kid, being whatever it was, 10, 11 years old, went and spray painted the lawn. I think that's the story. And then he came back to Covey and his father, an actual paternal figure. No, this is not the organizational paternalism maybe you talk about. But so that was that time and the idea of delegation. And so that's where I come to it from this benevolent benevolent delegation.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
And so yeah, so that's when I hear the word delegation. There's also another bit that comes around that, is that when making decisions, that there are times where if you are in, and again, this is the argument that comes to me, when the house is on fire, when your building's on fire, when there's an emergency, sometimes it helps to have very clear direction and command and control in that way. I've heard this, and that made
Yeah,
sense
but what
to
does
me in
it
that
mean?
situation.
What
Well,
does
what's
I
well, you
think
know what I
this-
mean. My cat's clawing at the door, but I'm listening.
Yeah, I think, but let me pick up on this for a moment while you go to the door. I think this argument that when the house is burning, you need straight lines of authority. That's a real one of the. I think that's one of these decision-making myths in a way, right? Because you imply that when the house is burning, you better have bosses make the decision, right? But that is not what this is about. When the house is burning, better listen to the expert, who should be a firefighter if you have one, right? Or something. Science has shown that if the house is burning, women are smarter than women with kids, or are smarter than solitary men. Have you heard about this research?
I have not heard about this research. No.
When houses are burning, statistically, and I can only recite this roughly, but the statistics show that more solitary men they burn and die
They
in fire.
They perish in house fires.
They perish. Oh yeah, cease to exist, perish, end up like parrots and so on.
They're dead parrots. Yeah.
We're talking about tragedies, of course, but here we're talking about the statistics and the science behind it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, more solitary men in their best age who could be sporty and running away from the fire perish than women with children, because their protection mechanisms are wiser. Which is interesting, right? I heard this from a woman, of course. This is the kind of thing that I get from my spouse. So ideally, you should listen to somebody who has protective skill, and not just, It's the same thing, I think, in the mountains where the statistics also show that most people who die on Himalaya or whatever, on the highest of K2, most of these people are highly trained, mid-aged men. Yes, who overestimate their own powers. Don't trust bosses. Trust people with expertise, or wise people. Ideally, that's a good starting point for our conversation today.
Well, that and I think this also, again, I think in my head I tie it to the other principles too. Is that, well, if we are in practice, if we have presence of mind and are preparing constantly, then we are preparing ourselves for I would say surprise, but a certain sense of, to be safe in a building, you need to be prepared to exit that building. You need to be prepared to respond to an emergency and that level of standards that you agree upon, and that in this organizational container we're in, that we have standards. These are our safety standards that we will have we take responsibility for each other to be prepared for what have you.
And preparation safeguards us against overestimating ourselves. Like this advice that I always cherish in the planes before the start. In case, put the breathing mask first on yourself, then place it on others. Don't overestimate your own powers. That's what it says, right? Don't place it on everybody else and then you die. No. If possible, places on you, so that you have the power to save everybody else. Don't overestimate this, right? It's a beautiful piece of advice, beautiful decision-making mechanism, right? Do the wise thing, not the
not the
breath in the world.
Yeah,
this is Mission Impossible. Yeah.
to think you know more than you do. And sometimes
And managers, of course, are notoriously overestimating themselves. I think that's why command and control cannot work, because as a boss in a command and control organization, you're kind of conditioned to overestimate yourself, to overthink, to detach yourself from the circumstances too much. And that's, I think, why so many organizations end up perishing. That's if you see companies going bankrupt, it's usually because management is so detached from reality. That's one of the reasons why decentralization is key and why this principle matters in the codex. Of course, we are also relating this conversation today to one thing that one friend of ours, Daniel Mezek, always says: if you transform an organization and you do not change the mechanisms of decision making, you're not transforming anything. Yeah. So this principle is about getting rid of top down power over relationships to power with and decentralization, and that's connected in this principle. Yeah.
And that's, again, changing the system. And what is more engaging, if we think about the Gallup surveys that get trotted out every year about the workplace, they're disengaged in the workplace. And like there's some magic key to that by measuring that, well, and this is also from Daniel's work, that what engages someone more than making decisions.
Yes.
And deciding about what is to be done, and being in consultative relationship with people, not what's the decision? Oh, this is the decision. Now we have to you can figure out the how, but I'm wise manager, get to say the what.
Yeah.
And
I think one insight that's related to that is one thing I got from one of these BetaCodex cases. I'm not sure if I do not think the company is very beta anymore. It's an American company, energy sector, AES.
Yeah.
And their former CEO, Dennis Becker, wrote a beautiful book, Joy at Work, I think is the title. And one of the things that he describes very beautifully in his book is, highly recommend, by the way, one of the things he accentuates in this book is that usually we like to think that decisions in organizations, decisions are abundant. There are lots of decisions to be made, and that's a mistake. Decisions are rare, he argues. So CEOs or managers should not keep so many decisions to themselves. They should give everyone in an organization the opportunity to make important decisions. Decentralization is also important, and this relates beautifully to the engagement argument that you just brought up. The worst thing that top managers can do is to make a lot of decisions. Dennis Becker, he argues that ideally a CEO should only make one important decision per year. And the most important decision should be recruiting decisions, which is why peer recruiting, for example, is such a great thing, because then teams have the opportunity to make recruiting decisions. Everyone in a team makes recruiting decisions. There's nothing more energizing than that, choosing colleagues. It's the greatest decision you can make about who's on board, right? So important decisions are not so ubiquitous. Yeah. So we shall never centralize them in the hands of the few people. We should make decisions available to everybody. It's a totally counterintuitive kind of thinking for command and control ideologists like Adam Grant. Sadly, he is one. Yeah, obviously, he's a decision taker, right?
Well, and again, to not go too far in the demonization of Adam
No,
Grant.
not demonizing. It's not demonizing. There's so many command and control thinkers. We could make a list of hundreds of others, right?
Well, sure, and that is, and again, it's the assumption that this is just the way things work. That the authority is on top. We, just the workers, we're on bottom, and when a decision gets made, we'll trust that it's made with our best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And even with the most humane people and managers, they don't know everything.
Yeah, it's worse.
And
I think that's today. I have to mention a lot of my idols. Some of my idols. I think one of the people who best described this problem is Ricardo Semler of Semco in Brazil. He wrote this
yeah,
fantastic book, The 7-Day Weekend, and there he makes the case for managers not making decisions because they are too detached from the problem. They cannot know. The assumption that managers know better because they are managers is ridiculous. Right?
yeah,
It's hilarious. It's unscientific even, and that's why we like to use this graph, the famous Peach graph, that shows that the periphery is closer to the market, so it should make client-based decisions, while the center can serve the periphery. The periphery should serve the center. That involves the decision making about those problems that come up to the periphery, in the periphery, and on the client side, and it should not be the center that makes the decisions, right? So all this idea that managers are more capable, faster decision makers, it's all ludicrous. The opposite is the case. Yes, decisions should be made locally. Let's not. I think Adam Grant would say, yes, decisions should be made at the front line, which I hate as an expression, right? Because that sounds like First World War.
yeah.
World War One, World War Two, war. Let's not talk front lines here. Business is not war. Business is
Yeah.
about love. Yes. So we're not talking about frontline decisions. We're talking about closest to the problem, closest to the client, where the
Yeah.
mastery is. It's very simple. We don't need war metaphors to express that. And that's what mastery-based decision making, as opposed to bosses taking decisions, is about. And consequence, we will talk about that in a moment, right?
Yeah, and the okay, so there are a few things there. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that comes up when decisions are made and a team is making uh, decisions about more things than so if you have been in an organization that was authoritarian, command and control, position based power, and that kind of stuff, and the folks in power have the bright idea, the good idea, to say, well, this is not working, this is inhumane, and then let's go beta, let's
Yes.
do this and that. So
Usually,
that
I think my clients wouldn't say it's inhumane. I tell them sometimes. I tell them, and look, it's also inhumane, by the way. But they would. I think most of my clients, they would say it just doesn't work. Centralized decision making, bosses making decisions, middle managers, top managers making so many decisions. It just doesn't work. It's just wrong because it doesn't work. Yeah. But okay, you are right. It's inhumane too. Yeah.
well, I guess what I was getting to is that when that flip happens, right? So there's
Yes.
7,000 flips, right? That's
Yes.
an upcoming book, right? So of those flips, there's this idea of self-selection of teams, of everyone's in sales, everyone is in marketing when you're
In a
at the
way.
periphery. Now I think this is another topic for another day about how many teams does it take to serve a market in periphery, and what are the market definitions. But I think the idea I was getting to is the confidence in decision making when you do that first flip, and when you have, oh, not everybody on this particular cell has mastery in domains. It's not a truly cross-functional team. So and so we don't have, none of us in this cell have mastery in sales, marketing, staffing, recruiting, all those things. We're so used to outsourcing that, to delegating that decision outward or upward, right? Or to recruiting. So the thought is, okay. So my question, the question there is how do we say, okay, so what are the conditions for developing the mastery so you can make mastery based decisions? So you don't start with mastery, right? So you got to get mastery, and I'll talk about this musically. You need practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, man, practice.
Yes.
So there is a sense of that there are new practices for cells in the periphery to attain mastery.
Yes. On the other hand, I like to tell my clients that, look, you're running the business in command and control mode now, and it's sufficient for your company not to go bankrupt. It exists, or your organization exists, even though you are badly organized, centralizing, bureaucratic, doing too much planning,
Mhm.
centralizing decision making in the hands of bosses. And so you're doing all this wrong, but you're not bankrupt. You're still in business. So there seems that is proof that there is enough mastery around. Now, if you move or flip to a decentralized cell structure with mastery-based decision making, you should not suspect that you have too little mastery there. You should assume that you have enough mastery. Now, if you change the constellations from functional silos to functionally integrated cells, you might have, in certain teams or between teams, you might have imbalances. In the periphery, for example, you might have imbalances of capability or mastery. For example, you might have excellent people who generate business, rainmakers, to use a very old-fashioned terms. Yeah, you might have lots of rainmaking mastery in one cell and not so much in the other. So you might have to develop that in some cells to create balance. But usually the concept is to of course to put people to place people in every cell that together can do what it takes to run a business as such a team, as such a cell, right? So no single person has to have all the mastery, but within a team you should have a rounded set of masteries. Yes.
Well, this is why you call it cell
What is
structure
needed.
design, isn't it? This is the design element. So
That's why the
there's
constellations are so important. That's also why cell structure design, that's the trick. I see that currently with a client in Switzerland, in Geneva. The biggest challenge is to think through, okay, what constellations, who do we have to place together if a team has only 5, 6, 7, 8 people and shall not have 12, 15, 20, never ever, because then it's not a team, it's just a bunch of people. A loose entity, and we want to have socially dense teams. So one of the things to think through is how many senior people do we need, how many experienced and how many inexperienced, and how do we balance that, and the masteries that we need, which might be around professional capabilities, language, certain not only skill sets but inclinations. For example, you need in every team in the periphery, you need somebody who likes to talk to clients, and maybe not just one person but 2 or 3 ideally. So you need some level of diversity to have matching masteries to make teams complete and rounded, and that is a precondition to decentralizing radically and for this mastery based decision making. It's not just about individuals, it's also about how to decentralize to teams. Yeah.
And again, this is going back to the patterns of the principle of autonomy, team autonomy, that if a team is connected to the purpose of the whole organization in the sphere of activity, that team also has a design constraint, an enabling constraint for them that is their purpose, and how that purpose connects that group of 5 to 7 to the core purpose of the sphere, right? And so if
every business must be contained in a way. Every cell must have a contained proprietary business, so to speak. Can be a region, a certain business type of business or something like that, and it shouldn't be products. I think we discussed this earlier.
Yeah. So there are 2 questions on my mind.
Okay.
One I think comes up when any decentralization proposal comes, whether it's BetaCodex or something else, that there's an idea of decentralization. The idea of, well, what happens to the managers? Are we going to fire all the managers?
Yes.
And that's a fear, and that I know in the engagements that you've had, and we've talked about that comes. We're not going to. This is not about firing the managers.
Yes.
Right. Now, of course, in open space, there you said some people opt out, of course, and some that in part of the organizational hygiene, but
yes.
but the the activity of managing, right? So that the idea that, oh, decentralization, self-organization is not about, so it's unmanaged, it's complete chaos. That is bullshit.
Yes.
And that yes, there's management, there's discipline, this is what it takes to be in practice, in presence of mind, and how you do again, mastery based decision. So how do we manage our sales, and what are we doing to interact with other teams and with the center so that we can deliver the market? So there's a sense of managing those activities within the cell. And
Yeah.
so this is,
I wouldn't even talk about managing, but this is a question of style.
what it's the lexicon of it.
Running the business, I would say, understanding the business, learning, improving, serving clients, and so on. That's what I wouldn't call it managing personally. But
So
actually trying to liberate. My preference is to liberate the world of the word to manage. There's no problem with managers. Managers are needed for compliance reasons, but I would always reject the notion of managing, because that's the advantage. One of the benefits of having such a small team is that nobody needs to manage anymore. People can go back to work. I like to think that command and control managers are imprisoned in managing activities, steering, bribing, forcing, punishing, coercing. And we know how deadly these side effects of this. This is like managing is a weapon of motivational mass destruction. Yes, that's why the Oppenheimer movie comes very timely. It's like a big metaphor for managing.
Managing people, right? So the idea of said that people don't need to be managed.
Yeah, and processes. What do you want?
So there's and this comes to the, how do we define the words that we're talking about? How do we communicate to this came to me recently. It's like, well, it's business administration. We are administering the business, and that I think that is it. What is the MBA degree? Is the Master of Business Administration, and what do executives do? They administrate. What does the we talk about the bureaucracy, which I think that's kind of coming in the second. What you administer a bureaucracy to, and I think you administer rules. So
feeble, right? So feeble.
Yeah. So, and again, this is the idea of how do we speak about what happens within the boundaries of our team.
Yes.
And how do we?
I think and I think what I wanted to aim at, just maybe something while you were talking, I couldn't stop thinking about, okay, what is why do I dislike the term managing so much? Not manager. Again, I have nothing against manager. You need some people who do the Hausmeister Deluxe stuff, the boring administrative compliance work. So that's why managers should exist. But managing, whenever I hear it, I like to think, what do we really mean? That sounds like a song by, what do you mean? It's Justin Bieber or something, a song. What do you really mean? What do you really? You're not into Justin Bieber, but that's
no. Well, I mean, he's a great drummer, actually, by the way. But
yeah, exactly. Very, very good instrumentalist. Yeah, yes. I always wonder. But okay, when people talk about managing, what do they mean? Do they mean organizing or planning or deciding or administrating or steering or coordinating? Let's be more specific, please. That's why I actively dislike the term managing, because it's such a fluffy nothing, and by the way, most people associate managers with decision making, taking us back to the principle, right? And that's the biggest mistake. Managers are not paid well to make decisions. They are paid well, rightly so, I think, because they have legal responsibilities that need to be compensated for, I think. So I have nothing against great salaries for managers. What I think we argue against is managers trying to control and steer and
power grabs,
business.
status-oriented power grabs.
And the status oriented, yes, the ego stuff. Okay, the ego stuff is real bullshit, and of course, trying to control the business, the day-to-day business, it's a big fault. That's just a big mistake. It's for amateurs, I think. Yeah.
And why it's more important to create the conditions where the cells in the periphery are making decisions to be in concert, in connectedness with the purpose of the organization.
And then again, now with open space beta, or open innovation approaches that you also promote together with Daniel and with the Open Leadership Network. I mean, one of the ideas behind all of these approaches, open space beta included all of Timebox change approaches, really, or very fast organizational transformation approaches. The idea is to place organizational development responsibility back in the hands of everyone, to devolve organizational development to everyone. I mean, we have, since the industrial age, we have gotten used to, dividing the work between everyone. Yeah, where we can
division into silos.
Yeah, not in the. I do not mean it in the negative sense. In the positive sense that the work can be shared by many people, right?
Yeah.
But organizational development and change, we are still not quite, or most people are quite not there yet to say, no. If we have 1,000 people, why don't we do organizational development with 1,000 people? Or if we have 170,000. Why don't we do that organizational development or change or transformation work with everyone, potentially, or the willing, as we like to say? Yeah. And so that kind of decision making should also be placed in the hands of everyone. And it's with these approaches, it's totally possible. Yeah.
So, and again, the word Comenius comes to mind for a way to bring that kind of knowledge to the people in the cells in the periphery. But that, I think, is for another day.
Yes. That's why,
the
just not so that you mentioned it, that's the learning platform, Comenius with a Q at the beginning, but relating to the name, John Amos Comenius, the sage of modern education, who lived 350 years ago. I think, of course, education is key to making that happen, to put responsibility in the hand of everybody. You need to educate people, Well, but we have education for most, in the hands.
Well, and again, it's in this the reason why I mentioned Comenius and the small group discourse didactics of being in small teams together, and this was my question: how do we develop mastery? Well, how do you learn how to be with these people on your team? How do you learn, and if it's a new team or new constellation, that it's important to learn how to be together, to be in discourse with one another, to be able to address conflict and to work through conflict and to grow from that conflict in those socially dense cells. Yes. And okay, so that I think there's so many ways that mastery-based decision, I think we're talking about that it makes so much sense that it is one of the keys to unlocking the power of beta and the BetaCodex. And so the laws underneath that principle, that is consequence, not bureaucracy.
Yes, that was what it says in the law, right?
That's what it says in the law, and that was the first thing. I totally get mastery-based decision, and I can riff on that, and as we have been doing for the last 38 minutes, the idea of consequence versus bureaucracy. I think, to me, where I started with that, there's bureaucracy, adherence to rules, there's punishment and rules, there's a reward and punishment based on bureaucratic structure versus the what are the consequences of the decisions that are made, that we make. So that was what was in my mind. What was in your mind when you wrote that the laws, the this, not that?
And when we did the last review of the laws, I think that was in 2018, and I did it together with Silke, most of it. And when we re-articulated these principles the last time in 2018, I mean, we made a minor change. You, by the way, contributed this last minor change of one of the principles. Substituting tact with tempo.
Yeah.
That's another revision. But at the time, we asked ourselves, okay, this mastery-based decision making, how could it be articulated? And to articulate the negative side, bureaucracy, of course, it's pretty obvious, and everybody knows what it means. Now, and then we ask ourselves, okay, what is the positive, the beta side of decision making that we want to accentuate there in this principle? And consequence, it came up. That was one of these discussions that Cirque and I had at the time. Consequence, of course, to many people, it means something rather negative. But it's really, in the words of Mary Parker Follett, it's really, consequence is basically, fundamentally, something that happens in a power-with relationship. We need to be consequent with each other if we have a partnership. Some level of consequence is good, yes, with each other. And also to adhere mutually and together to certain consequences, for example, to binding principles. That is important. So the idea of consequence is not, oh, we will punish each other as M relationship. It's about ultimately what a beta organization needs is the realization that, okay, mistakes can be made, errors can happen, and so on. And you might make intelligent misjudgments, that later, with hindsight, prove to have been wrong. But that's what happens in real decision making. At the moment of deciding, you do not know if the outcome will be optimal or not. That will reveal itself later, because there will be surprise and uncertainty and ambiguity and all these things. So what can you do with decision making, or what should be binding principle? And we think that the opposite of bureaucracy is really, because bureaucracy creates this slack, right? This tolerance for everything. Bureaucracy it might punish you, but if you are clever, it will not. Nothing will hit
you. If you know the rules, you can game the rules.
Yes, and people play the game, and they know how to beat the game, and so on. In consequence, in a relationship, in a group of people, in a social group, when there's consequence, there is a certain discipline, a lack of. It won't. Things will not flap. You will be tight. You will be consequent with each other. Will there be punishment? No, but you will address with consequence when something bad happens. And when
this comes. This may be a tie-in to what someone viewing this. In that, when I hear that, what comes to mind is accountability.
Yes,
that we are
a very boring word, but it's related to that. Yes,
but that word that's lingua franca in the Agile world, in the Scrum world, because it's explicit in the Scrum guide about.
But it's also the problem with accountability. You are totally right. It could have been the word, but accountability is very related to command and control, I think, as well.
I'm accountable to.
Yeah. While responsibility, that's one of the words we always preferred. Responsibility is something that you need to take, that you need to assume. Accountability is, you have your job description, you're accountable. I will hold you accountable. That's usually a very command and control hierarchical. It suggests that there might be. With consequence, we are, of course, thinking of relationships among equals, and that is much more than punishment, of course. It is to hold each other accountable, yes, but hold each other, not bosses holding their underlings accountable, hold each other accountable. To provide that there will be, that's something that we always say in beta there, and also in transformation, there shall be no winners or losers, but there will be consequence. Yeah, there will be, everything has a price. My actions, if I behave ethically, it will have a price. If I behave unethically, it will also be a consequence. So also this principle relates to the ethics of decision making. So it's really something to take apart, right? This principle has many layers. The term consequence, I think it's very philosophical for me. I hope it relates other people can relate to it as well.
Well, and I think this is one of the many flips that are these paradigm shifts, again, borrowing from Covey a little bit about this being a paradigm shift of instead of being accountable, I am accountable to this person for this decision, and
Yes.
they will hold me to account. So,
Yes.
but if I can game the rules, then hey, you can't hold me accountable. I followed the rules.
Yeah.
As opposed to this, I
Exactly.
made this decision. I'm responsible for the results of this decision,
Yes.
and I'm willing to take the blame because I made the decision.
Yeah.
And I am not afraid of so I make a little bet with this, that because of my mastery, I'm going to say this I believe this, I'm passionate about this, we agree that this is the direction we're going to go, and it doesn't.
And everything has a consequence, right? There is this illusion that you can decide or not decide, but that's not true. Every non-decision is a decision too.
Mm-hmm.
And there will always be a consequence. Not deciding or trying to not decide will have a consequence. Deciding quickly or slowly, fast, confidently or not, or whatever, there's always consequence. So I think consequence is also one of the key aspects of decision making. The decision in itself is just an artifact. But what's more interesting, more important in the process of making decisions in a social context, in an organizational context, is to face the consequence. And these consequences may have consequences to the outside, or to the market or stakeholders, and also to ourselves making the decision, or the groups involved in making the decision. It's a very layered concept, I think. Yes,
it is.
Refer people to the booklet that we just published.
Yes. Oh, speaking of the booklet,
you have it already. I still do not have it.
I have the booklet.
Hey, how does it look? Can you turn it? The binding? Can I see the binding? Nice. Okay, good. Yes, I haven't seen it in print yet. Yes, the American edition, or the English edition. That
is a precious thing for me.
Everything that we just talked about, I think, is there on one page, pretty much, right?
Yeah. And again, to make this principle and these principles not digestible, but to take them to heart and to be able to live them and articulate them, that this idea of consequence, and I don't know that you're necessarily into the sports metaphor, but what I think of that is because there's the football team sports metaphor, that combative kind of American football, right?
Yes.
Of European football, the real football, right, is less so. But what I think of, where I come from, Indiana, in rural Indiana, which Indiana it's all about basketball. It's high school basketball and everything about basketball.
Okay.
That the basketball team is 5 players on the floor, and four folks who are in the backup, and you have a 6th man who comes in the pros. When they're professional basketball teams, I think the sense of the teams that were most successful, and if we think about the master of masters in basketball and professional basketball being Michael Jordan, and that there's many stories about him being an insufferable asshole, but in that sense, so Michael has this mastery capability that is unquestionable. The greatest of all time. But in the first few years of play, it was all about him. He was the number one scorer. He was doing the stuff. He didn't have the whether it was trust in the people around him. He didn't have that sense of play with the team, and then
an ego, right?
A huge ego. But when Phil Jackson came and brought the triangle offense, which was this kind of very much a participative, again, not liking that word, I know, but it was a very, very much, there was flow that they would follow the ball around. It wasn't these set plays necessarily, but I think the idea of Michael was responsible for a lot of the scoring, and everyone knew it. But there were other people who were responsible. When I'm gonna pass it out to the 3-point line, and John Paxson or Steve Kerr, the players, they're gonna take a shot and they're gonna take responsibility for that. If I'm gonna pass you the ball, I trust you to make that shot out there. And that this sense of growing mastery as a team versus growing mastery as individuals with ego.
Very good point.
Is and I think that also brings into the federalization of the sportsmanship.
Yes. And it means to, of course, this principle, mastery-based decision, you just nailed it, I think, with the story you told. Ultimately, this is not about do we make decisions, who makes decisions, but also to curate mastery in every team and in every team member. And you need it in decentralization. That's what makes an organization. That's why decentralized organizations have so much more potential, can be much more high performing, because they create the conditions for mastery in everybody to unfold, which cannot happen in silos, in siloed organizations where the HR marketing boss and tries to keep his underlings dumb, like the pyramid of incompetence, as it was once called. That, of course, it crushes the development of mastery, and with a long-term cost. So decentralization and mastery-based decision-making is also this idea that we should use every decision as an opportunity to curate and to instigate the development of further mastery in the decision maker. That's why individual consultative decision making, an approach that we find in every beta organization, is so key at Toyota, at Southwest Airlines.
Yeah, and it's care and compassion for if you're and again, yes, this is the music metaphor too. If you're in an ensemble with, and you have this level of mastery, and you're with a younger kid that you care about them, that you want them to be better. If they want to be better, you want them to be better, and you want to help them be better.
Yes,
and that sense of being.
Here's my final words.
Being in ensemble. Yes.
Here's my final words on this. Beta is love. Love is beta.
Yes. Awesome.
That's what it's all about. Decision making, mastery. It's all about love.
Love is all we need. Love is all we need. Yes, indeed. Well, Niels, this has been a fantastic session. As always, I enjoy this time with you every week, and now sooner than every week now on Monday. So we will check out here and head over to
our after party. BetaCodex.org /live. As always, so we will meet with, if anybody has attended this and wants to join us there on Zoom, see you there.
See you there. Bye-bye, everybody. Fantastic day today, and be more beta. Beta is love. Love is beta. Fantastic. See you next week on Monday.